One of the final murders that you committed, of course, was apparently little Kimberly Leach, 12 years of age. I think the public outcry is greater there because an innocent child was taken from a playground. What did you feel after that? Were there the normal emotions 3 days later? Where were you, Ted?
Theodore Robert Bundy was an American serial killer, sex offender, and necrophiliac who kidnapped, raped, and murdered numerous young women and girls during the 70s. After more than a decade of denials, he confessed to 30 murders committed in 7 states between 1974 and 1978. Ted Bundy was born on November 24, 1946, to Eleanor Louise Cowell at the Elizabeth Lund Home for Unwed Mothers. Ted Bundy's father has never been confirmed, but is claimed to have been a war veteran named Jack Worthington. Ted Bundy lived with his grandparents, Samuel Netch Cowell and Eleanor Miriam Cowell, till he was 3 years old, in Philadelphia to avoid the social stigma that accompanied birth outside of wedlock. Bundy occasionally exhibited disturbing behavior at an early age. Lewis's younger sister, Julia, recalled awakening from a nap to find herself surrounded by knives from the kitchen, and 3-year-old Ted standing by the bed smiling. Bundy's childhood neighbor, Sandy Holt, described him as a bully, saying he liked to terrify people. He liked to be in charge. He liked to inflict pain and suffering and fear. In 1950, Ted's mother, Louise, changed her surname from Cowell to Nelson, and at the urging of multiple family members, they left Philadelphia with Ted to live with cousins Alan and Jane Scott in Tacoma, Washington. In 1951, Ted's mom met Johnny Culpepper Bundy, a hospital cook, at an adult singles night at Tacoma's First Methodist Church. They married later that year, and Johnny formally adopted Ted. Johnny and Louise conceived 4 children together, and though Johnny tried to include his adopted son in camping trips and other family activities, Ted remained distant from him. He would later complain to a girlfriend that Johnny was not his real father, wasn't very bright, and didn't make much money. Investigative reporters McCall and Ainsworth stated Bundy's recollection of his Tacoma years as roaming his neighborhood, picking through trash barrels in search of naked pictures of women. He also told attorney and author Paulie Nelson that he pursued detective magazines, crime novels, and true crime docs for stories that involved sexual violence. Accounts of Bundy's social life also varied. He told journalists McCall and Ainsworth that he chose to be alone as an adolescent because he was unable to understand interpersonal relationships. Ted Bundy claimed that he had no natural sense of how to develop friendships. His classmates from Woodrow Wilson High School contradicted this by stating that Ted Bundy was well known and well liked at school. After graduating from high school in 1965, Bundy attended the University of Puget Sound for 1 year before transferring to the University of Washington, UW, to study Chinese. In early 1968, Bundy dropped out of college, then worked a series of minimum wage jobs. He also volunteered at the Seattle office of Nelson Rockefeller's presidential campaign and became Arthur Fletcher's driver and bodyguard during the Fletcher campaign for lieutenant governor of Washington state. After graduating from UW in 1972, Ted Bundy was hired as an assistant to Ross Davis, chairman of the Washington State Republican Party. Davis thought well of Bundy and described him as smart, aggressive, and a believer in the system. In early 1973, despite mediocre LSAT scores, Bundy was accepted into law schools of UPS and the University of Utah on the strength of letters of recommendation from Evans, Davis, and several UW psychology professors. In January of 1974, Ted Bundy had begun skipping classes at law school. By April, he had stopped attending entirely as young women began to disappear in the Pacific Northwest. There is no consensus as to when or where Bundy began killing women. He told Nelson that he attempted his first kidnapping in 1969 in Ocean City, New Jersey, but did not kill anyone until sometime in 1971 in Seattle. He also told psychologist Art Norman that he killed 2 women in Atlantic City while visiting family in 1970. 1969. Some investigators believe Bundy started killing as a teenager, but his earliest documented homicides were committed in 1974 when he was 27 years old. By his own admission, he had then mastered the necessary skills in the era before DNA profiling to leave minimal incriminating forensic evidence at a crime scene. During the first half of 1974, female college students disappeared at the rate of about one per month. On March 12, Donna Gail Manson, a 19-year-old student at the Evergreen State College in Olympia, 60 miles southwest of Seattle, left her dormitory to attend a jazz concert on campus but never arrived. On April 17th, Susanna Lane Rancourt disappeared while on her way to the dorm room after an evening advisors meeting. Two female Central Washington students later came forward to report encounters, one on the night of Rancourt's disappearance, the other 3 nights earlier, with a man wearing a sling who was asking for help carrying a load of books to his brown or tan Volkswagen Beetle. On May 6th, Roberta Kathleen Parks left her dormitory at Oregon State University in Corvallis, 260 miles south of Seattle, to have coffee with friends at Memorial Union but never arrived. Investigators from Seattle and King County grew increasingly concerned. There was no significant physical evidence, and the missing women had little in common apart from similar appearance. Young, attractive, white college students with long hair parted in the middle. On June 1st, Brenda Carol Ball, 22, disappeared after leaving the Flame Tavern near Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. She was last seen in the parking lot talking to a brown-haired man with his arm in a sling. In the early hours of June 11th, University of Washington student George Ann Hawkins vanished while walking down a brightly lit alley between her boyfriend's dormitory residence and her sorority house. The next morning, 3 Seattle homicide detectives and a criminalist combed the entire alleyway on their hands and knees, finding nothing. Bundy later told Keppel that he lured Hawkins to his car and knocked her unconscious with a crowbar. After handcuffing her, he drove her to Issaquah, a suburb 20 miles east of Seattle, where he strangled her and spent the entire night with her body. In 1975, Bundy shifted much of his criminal activity eastward from his base in Utah to Colorado. On January 12th, a 23-year-old registered nurse by the name of Carol Eileen Campbell disappeared while walking down a well-lit hallway between the elevator and her room at the Wildwood Inn. Her nude body was found a month later next to a dirt road just outside the resort. She had been killed by blows to her head from a blunt instrument. Her body also bore deep cuts from a sharp weapon. On August 16, 1975, Bundy was arrested by Utah Highway Patrol Officer Bob Hayward in a residential area in his Volkswagen Beetle during the pre-pawn hours and fleeing at high speed after seeing the patrol car. He noticed that the Volkswagen front passenger seat had been removed and placed on the rear seats. He found a ski mask, a second mask fashioned from pantyhose, a crowbar, handcuffs, trash bag, a coil of rope, an ice pick, and other items initially assumed to be burglary tools. Bundy explained that the ski mask was for skiing. He had found the handcuffs in a dumpster, and the rest were common household items. However, Detective Jerry Thompson remembered a similar suspect and car description from the November 1974 DeRanch kidnapping. The police did not have sufficient evidence to detain Bundy, so he was released on his own recognizance. Salt Lake City police placed Bundy on 24-hour surveillance, and Thompson flew to Seattle with 2 other detectives to interview Klepfer. She told them that in a year prior to Bundy's move to Utah, she had discovered objects that she couldn't understand in her house and in Bundy's apartment. These items included crutches, a bag of plaster in Paris that he admitted stealing from a medical supply house, and a meat cleaver that was never used for cooking. Additional objects included surgical gloves, an oriental knife in a wooden case that he kept in his glove compartment. With this information, police were closing in on Bundy, and the end was near. In September, Bundy sold his Volkswagen Beetle to a Midvale teenager. Utah police impounded and FBI technicians dismantled and searched it. They found hairs matching samples obtained from Campbell's body. Later, they also identified hair strands from those of Smith and DeRanch. On October 2nd, detectives put Bundy into a lineup. DeRanch immediately identified. In 1975, Bundy was arrested and jailed in Utah for aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault. He then became a suspect in a progressively longer list of unsolved homicides in several states. Facing murder charges in Colorado, Bundy engineered 2 dramatic escapes and committed further assaults in Florida, including 3 murders before his ultimate recapture in 1978 for the Florida homicide. Bundy was executed at Florida State Prison on January 24, 1989.